Welcome to Black Woman Leading the podcast. I'm Laura Knight, your host and the founder of BlackWomanLeading.com. Today, we're talking about moving beyond titles with Suezette Yasmin Robotham. If you want a more accessible option for what it means to be authentic in the workplace, if you want insight and wisdom on how to lean into your own personal leadership brand and authentic voice, and if you want to access more flexibility, opportunity, and even confidence by leaning into your skill sets and not just your title, then you need to keep listening. Let's get into it. This podcast amplifies the needs and experiences of Black women leaders in the workplace with a holistic focus on three core areas: leadership development, mental wellness, and relationship management. Our ultimate aim is to help Black women learn, heal, and grow in their leadership capacity. Get ready, sis. The Black Woman Leading Live Conference and Retreat is back for our 4th annual event. And this year, we're leveling up. In 2026, we're developing future-ready leaders. Leaders prepared to rise, adapt, and thrive in a world that's changing every single day. Designed by Black women for Black women, this is a one-of-a-kind professional development experience. You go deep into the heart work and the head work, the alignment, strategy, clarity, and confidence you need to boldly walk into your next level. This year, we're spotlighting the skills and mindsets that define future-ready leadership, navigating disruption, leading through change, anticipating opportunity, and adapting with resilience and vision. Whether you're an emerging, mid-career, or senior leader, this space was created with you in mind. True to our cultural roots, we learn in community, across generations, across experiences, and across our shared brilliance. You'll be surrounded by Black women leaders, coaches, and experts, including direct learning from yours truly as the creator of the Black Woman Leading programs and podcasts. If you are ready for transformation, if you are ready to expand your leadership and your wellness, if you're ready to prepare not only for what's now, but what's next, then you belong here. Join us at Black Woman Leading Live, May 11th through the 14th in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Save your seat at www.bwlretreat.com. Your future-ready leadership journey starts today. Black woman Hey everybody, so today we are talking about moving beyond titles with Suezette Yasmin Robotham. Welcome, Suezette.
Thank you for having me, Laura. I'm so excited to be with you.
I'm excited for this conversation, and I feel like we had to go through some things to get here.
Hey, take me through there, okay?
So that means this is a good conversation, right, that needs to happen. So before we jump into that, let me give you all that's listening the official about Suezette. Suezette Yasmin Robotham is a best-selling author, global talent and culture executive, executive coach, and keynote speaker with 2 decades of experience shaping leadership in an AI-accelerated world. She has led talent and leadership strategy at Google, Meta, Gartner, and Salesforce, and advises global organizations on building cultures rooted in clarity, accountability, and trust. A TEDx speaker and featured voice in the award-winning See Her Multiplicity docuseries, Suezette is known for helping leaders move beyond performative leadership and lead with discernment, courage, and alignment. Known for her warmth, wit, and unflinching honesty. Okay, we need some of that, sis. She is a mentor we all wish we had in the room. And so when Suzette's team reached out to me and I learned a little bit about what her book was about, it really resonated on some different points that we've talked about along this journey. If you've been following the podcast for any time, and of course we do cohort programs. So if you've been in any of our programs, we've had the conversation of not conflating identity with achievement, right? We attract high performers, we attract go-getters, and sometimes that title means a lot. We work for that, but what does it mean about that not being our identity, it being a part? So I felt it was so kindred to the conversations we've been having, and in this particular moment with a lot of Black women exiting the workforce, many of them by force, they're having to pivot outside of those titles and roles. And this is a particular moment for us. So what does that mean? So it was timely when the team reached out and I said, yeah, let's get into it. So first, before we jump into this title of the topic rather of moving beyond titles and learning a little bit more about the book, Suezette, here's a question I always ask our guests to get us started. What does the phrase Black woman leading mean to you? And we heard a little bit about your background, but share a little bit about your journey as a real life Black woman leading that led you to this point.
Well, first of all, I'm a true proponent for giving folks their flowers when you have an opportunity to. And so I just want to make sure I begin this conversation by applauding you for, in light of everything happening in the world, continuing to stay steady and hold fast to the fact that we need to be having the conversations about how we empower and uplift and inspire, but also resource
Yes.
our community with the things that we need to continue to do great things no matter what it is that we're deciding to do in the world. And so thank you, Laura, for that and for having me. And when I think about my own leadership journey, who I am as a woman and what leadership has meant to me, my leadership journey started as being a chatty child. And I talk a lot about that in my book. And my mother, in particular, really seeing that chattiness as an opportunity to shape and develop my voice.
That's
and
beautiful.
to use my voice. And time again throughout my life have seen the significance and the importance of leveraging my voice to create access and opportunity for others. I'm a first generation American, the first of many things in my family. But what I also know to be true in my leadership journey is that community and how you leave people after you've engaged with them and how you interact and how you continue to bring people along the journey with you is very much important. And so, there is what I hope never becomes a cliche, but a proverb about, wanting to go far and needing that to be in community with other folks. And so very much a servant leader, very much a daughter, a sister, a friend, a cousin, my niece's auntie, but also very much someone that is committed to creating access and opportunity for folks no matter what capacity I'm in. And so started my career in education reform. And so it's an education reform for a long time. And if you'd have been like 10 years ago, Suzette, do you think you'll be in tech? I would have just entered tech 10 years ago, but I had no sense of, right, that it was for me, but have also been the beneficiary of opportunities being presented to me and people opening doors for me and creating space for me. And, those serendipitous, things where it's like it looks circuitous, but all of those things were building blocks to where we are now, which is adding author to my title.
Yeah, that's exciting. So what is that story? You went from education reform to Google, Meta, Salesforce. Like, how did you transition? What was that path to transition to the tech space?
So quite honestly, it is the transferability of skills and someone seeing beyond the fact, right, that, it's very easy to play off, oh, somebody's not in an industry or sector, they're not a fit. I had the opportunity to join Google at a time where shout out to Laszlo Bach, right? Like that's talking about authors, right? But like he very much had our talent acquisition team at Google in a space where it's like, hey, we're growing by leaps and bounds, and we need to be more thoughtful and intentional about how we find talent. And it's not simply continuing to look for talent in a tech space. It's, there are all kinds of different pipelines and all kinds of different spaces where talent exists. And it just so happened that someone was like, hey, Teach for America, the education reform space has a lot of dynamic, great talent that would be aligned. And so can we see beyond the fact that they might be in a completely different sector and look for their skill and opportunity? And so I'd actually gotten recruited by an incredible recruiter named Michelle off of LinkedIn.
Wow.
And so as I think about where we're at right now, especially in the face of, I think we call it the age of AI, right? And AI has existed. I think if we talk about it from in a space where AI is actually transforming the workplace and
Right.
how we talk about skills, we're now in a place that I've benefited from, which is talking about somebody's skills and their values and their, potential for impact, and less about oh, Suzette was managing director of XYZ.
I want to come back to that skills conversation because I
Mhm.
think that's particularly powerful right now in this AI age. But we got to get into the book first. We got to
Yes.
get into the book, ma'am. So,
My baby.
so congratulations,
Thank
congratulations.
you.
Suzette's book, Beyond Titles, Fearlessly Leading as Your Authentic Self, is available now. And so we'll have all the links and all of that in the show notes. You all get the book. But tell me a little bit about what inspired you to write it. Was there a moment or a pattern you observed that made you realize this message was needed? What's the story there?
So I'll say it's twofold, right?
Okay.
So they meet at this fascinating intersection. So, um, your number one fans, your parents always say you got a book in you, but you never really know what that book is, right? And so somewhere, in the universe, my dad has stamped on me that girl's gonna have a book. Did I know it was gonna be this one? No clue.
Come on, Daddy,
Um,
speaking a word. Come on and speak a word, Daddy.
my dad was like, "You got a book in you." I was like, "Okay, Daddy."
Good.
And it just so happened in March of 2024, I was in London, and it was having lunch with a girlfriend there, and she's like, "You need to write a book." I'm like, "Okay, like what? Okay, like," and she's like, "And I'm going to introduce you to my publisher." And I was like, "Okay, wonderful, great, right?" And I'm one of those people. I'm like, "Is that how that's supposed to happen?" And I'm like, "If you honor life and an abundant universe, yes, that's how it's supposed to happen." And so she connected me to she connected me to her publisher,
Mm-hmm.
and her publisher connected me to the American division. And the publisher in the US was like, "Okay, here's our proposal. Um, and fill it out, get it back to us." And I was like, "Okay." So I was like, "Okay, Suzette, I'm going to give myself 90 days to figure out what this book that I didn't know I was about to write is going to be
Wow.
about." Right.
Wow.
And so this is 2024. And as you can imagine, day 87, I'm like, "Oh crap."
Not day 87.
Day 87, I'm like, "Girl, what is this book going to be about?" And the other thing to know, in the spirit of being a Jamaican woman, and I don't believe in stereotypes, but the stereotype about having multiple things going on, I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
So I've loved having full-time jobs and will always want to be part of organizations to learn and grow and develop. I always have had my thing on the side, right? And so I'm in the middle of a work trip. And I'm like, "You haven't finished this proposal, sis, and you got to get it to this lady." And so I'm like, away, I'm at Cannes Lion, and I'm crying to one of my mentors that happens to be there. "I haven't done this book proposal." And she looked at me, she's like, "Girl." So Lisa was like, "What are you crying for?" Like, she's like, "You have an expertise."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh, yeah." Because almost 10 years before and 10 years ago, I'd actually done my very first TEDx talk on the idea of covering that Deloitte had surfaced in Deloitte University. And, that's the experience of people hiding aspects of their identity in the workplace. So in 2015, I did my first TEDx talk called Uncovered, and being authentically myself in the workplace, right? And so for the last 10 years, I'd actually been called into organizations. So I actually had a bank reached out to me in 2017 and was like, "Hey, would you train our entire Canadian leadership team on your TEDx talk?"
Wow.
And up until that point, right, like if I go back into my background, I had done all kinds of leadership development and facilitation and workshop development and design when I was in the nonprofit space. And so I was like, "Yeah, I have the skill and ability to design, an adult learner, high, touch, high
Yeah.
impact workshop." And so began delivering workshops on my TEDx talk in 2017. And I've trained, I've gone into BCG. I actually, after I left Google, I'd gone back to Google and done trainings. And so when she's like, "Hey, Dodo, you actually have a whole
You've been doing
body."
this, right?
Yeah, like, stop overthinking it. Don't outthink yourself. Lean into it. And so as I began to work through it, I was like, okay, right, like, let's lean into this
Yeah.
this conversation around covering. And again, synchronicity, serendipity, whatever we want to call it, Deloitte came back out 10 years later with the research again
Wow.
around covering in the workplace in 2024. And Laura, what did surprise me, but doesn't surprise me, right, is that the data hadn't changed in 10 years.
Wow.
And so 10 years later, 61% of people were still covering in the workplace. And in this version and iteration of the study, they did multiple clicks into the data. And what they found was an even higher percentage of executives. So 67% of executives are covering in the workplace. And over 60% of people say that covering is impacting their mental health and well-being.
And covering is hiding, essential parts of you. What is covering, just so people understand what we're talking about?
So covering would be intentionally hiding aspects of your identity in order not to be othered in what you would perceive as the mainstream in the workplace, right?
Yes.
And so there are 4 different lenses that covering can take. It could be simply just not talking about something, right? So like not saying, oh, I'm a mom, right? Because you don't want people to be like, well, she's a mom, she's not going to perform.
Right.
And it can go so far as not associating in the workplace with people from your community.
Oh, wow.
In order for folks not to know that you might belong to that group, or to then stereotype you because you might identify or be a part of that group.
I see.
What was fascinating about the Deloitte study is when they looked at the data, covering had become habitual for people. So it may be that you've had a 20-year career and you've been covering forever. So you didn't start covering at your current employer, but it's just become your modus operandi.
Default behavior now. Wow.
Exactly.
Wow. So you have just gotten really comfortable with putting that little mask on every single day, pretty much.
Listen, and what they found again was that 60% of people are saying that it had an impact now on their mental health and well-being, anxiety and depression. And when you then look at data from the World Health Organization, people not showing up to work due to mental illness, specifically anxiety and depression, is about $12 billion of revenue lost every year.
Yep.
And so, while I could be like, oh, this book is about me. This book is data driven, right? And data that 10 years later is saying that
it's not
we
changing.
Are creating organizations that are causing strong impacts to people's lives and well-being.
Wow. And we definitely in the Black woman leading community, right, see people feeling like they have had to do some of that covering because of a lack of safety, or because of traumatic workplace experiences they've experienced in other places. So they've just made it like, I'm not going to even fool with it. This is just what I'm going to do. So in this book, you have a central question around, I thought was really powerful. Who are you when the titles fade away? And I think that hits different. I think it's relevant to everybody, but I think it really hits different for a lot of Black women, as I mentioned, who may be the first, the only, the achievers, right? And who felt they had to work twice as hard to get some of those titles. So it's a validation for some people, but it also, you're getting to, like, there are some things underneath that we got to make sure we're not covering up. So why did you decide to start there with that question?
Because when I think about covering and when I think about our attachment, right, to titles, a lot of what I find in conversations with people is that absent a title, they don't know how to talk about themselves. So when you even think about culturally how we greet each other, right? And I've tried to break this habit. What's the first thing you say when you meet somebody at an event? Hey.
What do you do?
What do you do?
Yeah, what do you do? Yeah.
Right? And that attachment to needing to prove or be validated by a title is such an insufficient measure at the end of the day of who we are in totality.
Yep.
And so when I was thinking about, authentic leadership in this book and helping people to course correct or evolve through the conversation around recreating a narrative about themselves, the question has to be, when that title doesn't exist, who are you?
Who are you?
And how do
Yeah.
you sit with that? And how do we recenter and uncenter, right? Unattach ourselves from titles and really get back to, at the core of who we are as people sits values, it's its experiences, it's its purpose, it's its passion. And all of those things should be the guiding principles for how we live our lives, not titles. Because now, sitting where we are, again, with this transformation of AI, titles are no longer sufficient because the titles are changing.
The titles are
Right?
changing.
And
Yeah. Or
like at
obsolete.
lightning
Right.
speed, right? And there are titles that no longer exist. And if we only are seeing ourselves from those framings of, like, in the book I talk about, what is a program manager really? Is it that you're a program manager, or is it that you know how to distill information and create strategy and plans? It's the things that you actually can do from a skills lens. It's not the title.
Yeah.
And so it's, how do we, break the cycle of needing a title and begin to really fully lean into, there's a deeper ocean of things that are in us that inform who we are as people, and allow those things to show up for ourselves.
Yeah, and I love this kind of analysis here because it's about getting, like you said, underneath the surface and this evolving space. There's an element of identity there,
Mhm.
right? But then there's also a career development opportunity too, to expand what options are available to you as well, moving beyond that title as well.
Absolutely.
Let's dig a little bit more into this kind of skills based piece.
Mhm.
Give There's some people listening, and I'm pretty sure that's resonating with them. What you say, you're not just a program manager, or you have this, or you have this. How should leaders begin to think about themselves in terms of skills rather than titles? And what are some ways that they can get started trying to create more of that skills based identity when they talk about how they can contribute or the value that they bring? Walk us through how we can uncover some of that.
I love this question, Laura, because I'm going to say, buy my book.
Buy the book. Buy the book.
Buy the book. But actually, for me, it's before you get to skills, you actually start with your values,
Yes.
right?
Okay.
Because your values then help you to really lean in and identify what your core skills are, right? So,
Got it.
like, if you're somebody that, for instance, um, it's like empathy is a really strong value for me. And then you begin to parse out the skills in alignment with empathy. Those people tend to be really strong relationship builders,
Yes.
right? So I can
Yes.
build strong, meaningful, strategic relationships. I'm
Yes.
able to listen to understand, right? And so if you are able to begin with your value set and then parse it out to skills, it begins to make the conversation feel more aligned,
That's
right? Because
good.
oftentimes, when we think about it from a title, we might not think about. So you might be like, which when you now look even at job boards, people are no longer hiring for chief revenue officers.
Yeah.
In most places, they're now hiring for strategic partnerships leaders, right?
Yes. Yes.
And if you are so stuck on being a chief revenue officer and can't think about partnerships, right? And all of those going back to being relational, and you might enjoy those roles because you enjoy relationship building, and that goes back to empathy, right? Like, if you start with you and your value set,
Yeah.
it should be informing versus you needing the title to inform what it is that you do, right?
That's
And
good.
so on and so forth, around even thinking about things like um integrity, right? Integrity leads to things like curiosity, being a constant learner. And so that's why I would say start with your value set, then begin to explore your skill set.
Okay. Now let's go back to this values piece because I think this is really powerful. What does it look like when someone is out of alignment with their values, right? What are some of those signs? Because there are some people who are listening to this and
Mhm.
realize the values piece is where I'm having some tension in this environment, in this role, in this season of my life. What does that look like? What's some diagnostic indicators that it looks like when someone might be out of alignment with their values at work or in a professional context?
I'll be very honest, Laura. It's the thing that we think about last. Our bodies tell us first
Yes.
when we are out of alignment, right? It's the
Yes.
we call it dread or the languishing, but your body, like, you don't want to move in the morning. Like when people have like
Yes.
that strong sense of the Mondays and that fatigue, if we are people that, I'm a woo girl, sit with our gut. Your
Yes.
gut will often tell you first before anything else that you're out of alignment. But I think sometimes, we brush it off. But
Yep.
your body has typically probably told you years before that you're out of alignment before you're able to admit that, right? And so I think
Yes.
sometimes it's like really sitting with I have a friend, and I won't use his name, but I'll use this example. He has gone to a neurologist, phantom migraines,
Mm.
and hasn't had them for years. Hasn't had them for years, is currently having them again. And so I said to him, I said, "What's happening at work?" He's like, "Oh yeah, you know what? Like some stuff's going on with the reorganization with the team, and I'm feeling not great about the people." And so I've now spent all this money going back to neurologist, and I'm like, I want you to journal through when these headaches come up and what's
Yeah.
happening.
That's good.
And as he's journaled, the headaches come up on his most stressful days of work right now because
Wow.
the environment is so intense. And I'm
Yeah.
like, things like a phantom migraine aren't going to just hit you out of the blue. Your body is telling you that you are experiencing this intense and this next level of stress.
Yes.
And because, right, like you're internalizing it and just rolling and dealing with it, you're not acknowledging it. And so your body is going to express it in different ways. Another example I'll give, and I know we both know women that never had an autoimmune issue
Ever.
before in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, you're in these high stress jobs where you're asking to be function with, do more with less.
Yep.
And when folks that have never had a health issue in their life now have autoimmune issues that they can't get rid of and will have for the rest of their lives.
Yep.
And that oftentimes is a product of the workplace stress.
Yep. Yep. And we've had to support, unfortunately, people in our Black woman leading community had to take a health or mental health leave of absence from work because of
Mhm.
the stress from work and these symptoms, right? These somatic symptoms that showed up. What's really interesting, if that's resonating with you and you're listening, a couple of episodes ago, I'm blanking on the number, but it's a couple of episodes before this one, we had Blessing Uchendu on, and she is a licensed clinical social worker and somatic coach. And
Mhm.
her episode was about how we can increase and access joy through our bodies by paying attention, by
Mhm.
understanding how our body is communicating to us. So that's really powerful to connect to. Something might be out of alignment. It's not always going to be externally. It's going to be your own experience with yourself, right? I love that. I love that. But it requires us to slow down and pay attention, because there's a lot of us too that have gotten used to driving, and your body's been talking to you for some time.
Yeah,
But it's when you are in complete shutdown that you in that hospital, you like, oh, this is what you were trying to say, body. So
exactly.
we got to be in alignment with self as well, in addition to these environments that we're talking about. Yeah.
Exactly. And I mean, outside of the body, because somebody's like, well, okay, I'm in tune with my body, but what should I be looking
Yeah, of
at in the
course, of course.
environment? Right. But I would never diminish the significance of the body, right?
Yes.
Because it's our compass point, it's our starting place. And sometimes, as much as we don't want to admit it, if we're feeling it in our body, it's likely showing up at work. We also
Of
just don't want
course.
to admit it,
Of
right?
course.
Like, and so like the times when you might be getting left off stuff, or the conversations with leadership aren't going well, and you like even sometimes it's um we're just not doing work that brings us joy anymore,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
sometimes it's not even as like significant or severe as the people. I don't always want to say it's the people.
Or the
Sometimes it's,
environment.
or
Right.
the
Right.
environment. Sometimes it's just like, what? I grew up thinking, as a Jamaican, right, that you had to be a doctor, a lawyer, a nurse. But that doesn't bring me joy. There's something else in the world that will make me happier. Sometimes it's just, you're just not doing
Yeah.
what would be aligned to your joy.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
it's an opportunity to rethink if this is not bringing me joy, right? Because sometimes also we get comfortable.
Very comfortable and
Um,
safe and
and
safe.
safe. And
Yes.
that's not also to our highest good. And so you get into a routine and it's not growing you or expanding you, right? And so I think it's also like looking at outside of the body, what's happening in this environment, or what am I doing that no longer feels like great or aligned, right? And so like
Yeah.
then doing another level of analysis.
Yeah, and I think it's too giving yourself permission that different seasons require different things. I
Yeah.
have, I'm thinking about different people that I've coached. I'm thinking of one person in particular who, went to school, had this dream of becoming a academic professor and a scholar within a university. Okay.
Mhm.
She went to school, she got her PhD, she did all of those things, she became the professor. And in that space, she realized this ain't it. This ain't
Mm.
it. And so part of it was almost like she felt like she was squandering this investment that she had made of time, of student loans, of, you
Mhm.
know, mental space of 20 years of her life. I'm going to be this professor. I'm going to be this professor. And then she got into that space and it wasn't really hitting. And she had to really give herself permission. She suffered through it for a little bit, but she
Mhm.
had to give herself permission to say, and is it okay to change my mind? Right? Is it
Yeah.
okay to realize that maybe I have evolved and what is something I desired at one point is not what I desire now. And I think
Mhm.
what I'm hearing you say in the message from the book is giving ourselves permission to say, hey, in different seasons of life, we have evolved, we have grown, our needs, our values may have shifted, that we can do something else. Or we could say, this was a beautiful 20-year run, but the next 20 years, baby, I'm gonna be over
Exactly.
here, right?
Exactly. And as a woman of faith, and again, I believe in an abundant universe, um, God, the universe wants us to learn lessons, right? So
Hmm.
it's not that we aren't to learn, but there's nothing in me that believes that God wants us to suffer.
Mm.
And if at any point you are at work suffering, the question to me then becomes, why are you staying there? Because the other thing, right, to the point around being first, is a lot of times we feel grateful to be somewhere. We should just be grateful to
Yeah,
be
yeah,
here,
yeah,
right? But like, okay, but we shouldn't be suffering. The
yeah.
world is too good of a place. Like life is too short. We were talking about it earlier
Yes.
for you to be anywhere suffering. And so if at the point you are feeling that you are suffering, it's time to do a deep dive and an assessment into what
Yeah,
what is causing it and how do you change that. And it may not be immediate, right? Look,
yeah,
I
yeah,
want to honor that we're in a very precarious job market. I want to honor that, some things, right? So like you decide you want to do this, you want to do this, might take you on a
yeah.
completely different learning journey. Like
Yes.
one of my best friends, her little sister went to law school and she's now a PA, and happily a PA.
Wow.
Right. And like, that's two different modes of education and a lot of time spent learning. But
Yeah.
it's the acknowledgement of like, this just is not it.
This is not it. Yeah.
Where do I find my goodness and my joy?
Yeah. And my contribution, right? Because
Yeah,
if it's not it for you, you're not going to be contributing at your highest level either. That's for
exactly.
sure. I love it. Let's go back to the chatty child. Okay. And because the book talks about building your brand, finding your authentic voice. And you were really blessed with having a mother who cultivated that, right?
Mhm.
There are some people, and this was, I think it was Dr. Minna Pratt in her episode where she talked about being this precocious and, like wild child, but it was tamped down, right?
Mhm.
She was, and later on as a full grown woman, she had to reclaim that, right? So whether you have been able to live in that forever or you had to or find it again, I want to talk a little bit about your take on authentic voice because we've heard this a lot, especially in the
Mhm.
context of leadership and career development. Tell us a little bit about, any distinction you put on that in the context of the book or your kind of thought leadership around this.
So hopefully this is not too much of a hot take, but I think authentic voice has been a hot topic this past weekend for a particular
Of
reason,
course, of course.
around a particular author in her book and being on a book tour and saying, visibility, work from home,
Yes.
etc. And I think where my mind continues to go in this particular season around authentic voice is we live in a space that often gives people that are influencers platforms that should be reserved for experts.
Hello.
And so we are conflating.
Girl, wait, you didn't wait a minute. Can we repeat it again? Because I know I got a podcast, okay, but I got some receipts for this thing. Because if I see one more doggone podcast or folks that is like, you just decided you want to talk about this yesterday, and here you are out here giving these people the life. Let me stop. Going back into what you're saying.
Listen, but have the receipts, have
Yes,
had
have
to
the
do the
receipts.
work,
Yes,
right? Have had to sit in corporate environments for better or for worse and build the muscle, right? Like do the thing.
yes.
And you look up and there are people giving harmful advice, but not only the advice harmful, you've never had to experience it.
Hello.
And so my concern, and then it's not data backed.
Yep.
Right? Like, and so in that particular case, like threading it, I think it's harmful generally to talk about visibility and needing to show up and work from home is harmful. And 10 years later, right? So we have this study, 10 years old. And if, and I'm not saying work from home is right or wrong. What I'm saying is we're not holding the workplace and organizations accountable for the environments that they're creating. So work from home or not, 10 years later, 61% of people are saying that they're covering in the workplace.
Yeah, and the numbers aren't lying. Yeah,
the numbers aren't lying, right?
Yeah.
And so there's no amount of visibility that is going to change the experience of the vast majority of people in the workplace. And then again, when I bring back the data of 67% of executives, senior level executives are saying they're covering the workplace.
Yeah.
That's not representative of if I went into an office or not. That's representative of a workplace culture and environment that is not supportive and developing and creating an environment that people feel like they can learn, grow, and develop.
Yes.
And so when I think about authentic voice in this space, and it's not that I don't think influencers can't have perspective. I love, you know what I'm saying? And this, in the democratization of information that we now have through social media, et cetera, I love different perspectives and ideas. What I don't want is for people to sit in a space of expertise they actually don't have, giving harmful advice to people.
Yes, because it's a lot of smoke and mirrors out here. And people really get sent off, right, in this space. So I love that. And I think it's, like you said, that it's context. It's context that matters. And it's also making sure that not only what we are consuming, that what's the scripture, right? The tree by the fruit it bears, right? That you have to do a little bit of investigation yourself of this information that's out here. You just can't consume this stuff and then make that kind of the lesson that you're taking in. But it has been a bit of a firestorm this past week on social media with everybody giving their hot take and all of that. But I love this authentic voice piece that you're bringing here. Let's take a little bit of a dive into the hard work, and then I do want to make sure that we ask you a couple of our season themes questions. We hear about kind of more of the tactical piece. That's that skills base. And have we done that assessment and thinking about how we can bring that forth in our career development, our leadership development? But there is a hard work piece here. And in Black Woman Leading Land, we talk about hard work as that internal self-awareness, your healing work that you might need to do. And so sometimes a tie to holding on to the titles, or to my earlier point of conflating achievement with identity, are some fears. There's some internal fears around, if I don't have this title. I think back to my friend I was talking about that was going to be that professor, that scholarly professor forever. There was some fears about what that meant if she then abandoned that course, right, that she was on for 20 years. What do you find in your work and in this research you've done around here about some of the internal fears that keep people attached to those titles? What do you see around that?
A girlfriend of mine, and I quote her in my book, said that everybody over 21 years old needs to be in therapy. And I think a part of our attachment to fears is that we are not necessarily going along our professional journey with the support and guidance of a mental health professional. Now, I want to name that I understand, especially, during the times that we're in, with lack of access to healthcare, et cetera, that it is a luxury and a privilege to be able to have a culturally competent mental health professional. But I think, again, going back to chatty little girl in, our childhood, and a lot of our attachment style goes back to how we were raised.
Absolutely.
Right. And again, going back to who we are as people begins foundationally with, the experiences that we've had across an entire life that are
Yes.
not just necessarily showing up,
Yes.
at 44 years old, but have been a lifetime of like things that we've learned and ways that we've learned to adapt.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think that um, one of the most important things that then we can give ourselves is some sort of support through mental health.
Yes.
And mental health, for some folks it might be like you might need a life coach, but some kind of objective party that is able to help us analyze and assess. And quite honestly, the word that you use that I love is heal,
Yes.
right? Through um through the things that keep us bound
Yep.
to unhealthy conditions and environments, right? And I will say, if somebody was like, "Well, okay, Suzette, that's great," I'm like, it's the whole second chapter of my book is talking about my own mental health journey. And my mother, I will say again, thank God for my mom, and also thank God for my dad, because my dad was also.
Yeah.
Um, I will never downplay how him also being like the person that would let me debate with him and reason
Yes.
with him. My mom was
Yes.
like, "Don't send that girl in here debating me. That's y'all's thing, right?"
Yes.
But um Suzette, what does that look like in practice? Are there resources if I don't? I think there's a lot of great books within, again, I will say Woo Girl, kind of more in that
Yeah.
spiritual realm, that can help you like begin to do the work of letting go.
Mhm.
So Dr. David Hawkins has this book about surrender.
Yeah.
And even for me, that like I go to therapy every single week, I'm like, oh, like I do. It's so simple, but we do just have attachments to
Yep.
things,
Yeah.
right? And especially in um, times of unrest or like, lack of clarity, we grab on even tighter to the things that we most firmly understand, but those things can also be to your detriment
Yeah.
in this space.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of, even for me in the last year, I've had to surrender. So, I wrote a letter to God in August of last year. And so, God, I surrender all of this to you.
Mhm.
My book wasn't out yet. I surrender the book. I surrender my career. Whatever you have for
Yeah.
me, I, in a faith, will follow and go. And the next month, I got laid off.
Hey, he like
I
do
was like,
let
well,
me
was
see
this
if
the
you gonna
thing?
really do
You
this thing.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And, I've spent my book anniversary 6 months was the 21st. So this week I haven't gone without, and
Wow.
I've
What a
been able to
blessing.
build my brand and be focused. But to your point, it's I have my therapist, I have the resources, I have my community, and I've leaned into acknowledging when my body doesn't feel
Yeah.
great. I've leaned into acknowledging when I need rest. But it's this broader acknowledgement that I think we both would agree is like seeing yourself as a whole
Yes.
person
Yes.
and asking like, what is it that I need? And if you feel fear, what is causing
What is
that fear and how
let's
do I
lean
address
into
it?
that. Let's tap into that, because some of the healing too, there's a lot of healing, right? And we want to be
Mhm,
trauma informed. Some of the healing is from things we've experienced in our life that has given
mhm,
us a certain self concept about ourselves. Some of the healing is from stories or narratives
mhm,
that we hold as true, and when we really
mhm.
dissect those things, they're not true, or they're not true for you. They may be have been true for your mama or your grandma, or but that's not
Exactly.
your story, and you can shift that. You can write a new narrative, right? So I love bringing in professionals, your license as a licensed mental health professional, a licensed mental health
Mhm,
professional, but also
mhm,
there's a space for coaches, life coaches, executive
mhm.
coaches as well, to help you do your future forward goal coaching and things around that. I love it. I want to ask you one more point on this, and then I'll ask you a few of our seasons theme. We know we're in a moment for Black women. Over the last months, over 600,000, I believe, is the number now. Black women have
Yes.
been laid off, right, in recent months, and you talked about being part of that number, even in your experience. And what I
Mhm,
found in supporting people in our Black women leading that are experiencing this, it can be two camps, right? And maybe there's some other camps, but the two dominant camps I see people who are really experiencing some grief. And we did an episode
mhm.
on that earlier this season of grief from career
Yes.
transitions. They fought hard to get this, it blindsided them, and it kind of knocked them off of their square, if you will. But then there are some other people who have been quietly dreaming about a pivot for
Mhm.
some time. And because of, the safety, the comfort, the
Yeah.
fear, they got bills, all of the things. This has been a relief. Like, okay,
Yeah.
I got a moment, right? And so
Mhm.
I would love, just from the context of this beautiful body of work you put together with your book, how do we speak to both of those women in this season in context of their pivot? There's one who's mourning. There's one who's secretly relieved and like, oh my God, maybe I can do the thing or
Mhm.
go after the thing. What do we say to them in this pivot? And if there are any practical steps we can offer to them on, where do you go now with this pivot? How do you move forward now with this pivot?
I love this question because I think we reserve grief for the loss of another,
Yes,
and we don't extend necessarily the belief or the grace to ourselves for grieving. Again, right? Like, being a professional person is a part of your identity. It shouldn't be your sole
of
identity, but
course.
like grieving aspects of our identity that may no longer be true.
Yes.
Right. And so, even for myself, right, like, I didn't expect to get laid off. Right. And I had the fortune of, I happened to be home for Labor Day. I happened to be sitting at my mother's kitchen table. I got onto what I thought was a regular check in because it was already scheduled, and, was told that my role was being
Ugh.
eliminated. Right. And, um, you know, just went into shock and started crying because I actually really loved what I was
Mm,
doing. I really loved my manager and my leader. I respect her and would never say anything negative about her. I think Carrie is incredible. um and I allowed myself to grieve
mm.
because it was something that was important to me, and not in a superficial
Yeah,
way, right? Like,
yeah.
like, my career is a part of who I am. It's not solely who I am, but like, grieving that, I was building something new in our team, right? Like, the things I thought I was going to do. Like, I think you have to allow yourself the opportunity to grieve and experience, to grieve that part of your identity. I don't think you should get lost in it.
Absolutely.
Right. But I do think there is like some period of grief that should be allowed. For me, I allowed myself a month, right? Because then you also have to grieve habits that you form, schedules that you
Hello.
had, right? Like, right, like, it's an adjustment of like, I don't know if you ever had to take a leave. Even like, I've had surgery
Hmm.
before where I needed to take a medical leave, and it took me like a month to adjust to the fact that I wasn't waking up every day to
Yeah,
go to work.
yeah.
Right? Like, you have formed these habits and these conditions around your life that you're like, oh, that's not true now.
Exactly.
And so it's then, I would say, embracing that, and which is why I am again grateful to have had a therapist when this was happen. How do you like then begin to transition to how do I begin to give myself grace and the ability to explore what's
What's
next
next?
without needing to have every single thing figured out?
That's it. Especially for my planners, my sister who got this thing scheduled in her planner for 24
Exactly.
years in advance, right? Yes,
You want to make God laugh, make plans,
exactly.
right? And I think the key word is going to continue to be grace. It's grace with the, you don't have to have every single thing figured out
Yes.
right now. And it's also, I think what we don't name, and I talk a little bit in the book, there's shame
There's shame.
attached
There
to it.
is shame. Yes. And guilt
And it
sometimes as
and
well. Yes.
guilt, and it, again, how do you name and sit with the emotions that are coming up and acknowledge them, and then how do you address
Yeah.
them, right? And even in my case, right, like, I literally got laid off a month before my book came out
Mm.
about needing to know who you are with no titles. And I'm like, well,
Time to
I didn't know who are you with no title.
practice.
I guess I
Time to
you
practice,
gotta live
sis.
your
Yeah.
since you need to like know who it is. And again, like, the guilt around, like, man, like, if you're first in your
Yep.
family, like, dang, am I disappointing my mom?
Yeah.
I think where in this particular market, everybody should be like, everybody getting laid off. And
Everybody.
I don't say that with jest,
Yeah.
but this market is merciless to
Everybody.
everyone,
Listen.
right? And
Everybody.
it's also being, allowing for the human condition, but then also allowing for the practical reality of, we are in a market where organizations that were once rewarded for growth for the sake of growth are now being told that operational margins are most important
Yep.
to investors.
Yep.
And leaders and executives are going to follow what their
Yep.
investors want. And so it's also not taking it
Yeah.
personally, right? So the other resource I would say to folks as they're navigating this space, I don't know if you've ever read Don Miguel Ruiz, The Four
Yes.
Agreements.
Yes.
I think the agreement that people struggle with the most, and I actually, when I do trainings with leadership teams and
Hmm.
teams, I actually will lead with that for us to have a space of common
Yeah.
language. Because a lot of times, what is happening in teams is everybody taking it personally, but don't want to say
Don't
it.
want to say it.
So let me give you the language, right? But I think in this environment in particular, it's hard not to take it personally. And I'm not saying that people aren't getting laid off for personal
Yeah.
reasons, but in this environment, it
Anybody
is
can
a
get it.
little
Yeah.
bit of,
Anybody can get it at this point.
and so
Yeah.
it's how do you not internalize it as a reflection of your worth and your values
Yes.
and your
That's it.
skills, and see it as a reflection of a market that's not suited right now for what it is that you might be providing at that company, and think about what's your next thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's good. Anything else you want to share on moving beyond titles before I ask you one or two of our season 8 theme questions?
I would say what I want people to know about my book is it's meant for you to come back to it. You're not going to finish it the first
Okay.
time, because my exercises ask you to sit with and really think about yourselves. And a lot of times, the very last person that we've thought about is
Yeah.
ourselves. And it's asking you to think about yourself from a number of different lenses, but to think of yourself as
I
new.
love that.
And so I want folks to know that there's a companion workbook on the website. You can write in the book, but I don't want you to pick the book up and finish it and think it's
Yeah.
done. Life is a journey. The book is meant to take you on a leadership conversation journey. And so see it as I'm going to come back to this. And if you hesitate with any exercise in the book, again, what we've kept talking about is like, if something surfaces for you or you feel like angst about something, give yourself to sit with why.
Yeah.
Why don't I want to talk about that? Or, like I think, I've had people tell me in the part where I talk about your circle, like, man, like I realized like I've never had a mentor,
Wow.
right? And like, how do I look for this thing now? And then once you've identified it, working toward it, but come back and document it for
Yeah.
yourself, because it can become almost like also a diary for the reader to like be able to say, this is how far I've come, or this is what I still
I
need.
love that. I love it. I love it. I love it. So in this season 8, our theme was leaning into joy, right? And
Hmm.
thinking about as holistic humans, right? We're
Mhm.
leaders, we're
Mhm.
professionals, but as humans, how do we make space, right? Intentional space and practices to experience more joy in our life. So I'd love to ask you, what does leading with joy look like for you in this current season of your career?
Leading with joy for me is being able to create.
Hmm.
I have had the blessing of throughout my career being the very first person in a lot of my roles. And so it's really thinking about in my next opportunity, what would bring me joy is to like have kind of an open space to create something new and exciting within the talent and culture world and realm, right? And so I love, you see, I'm like lighting
Yeah,
up now,
you
like I
are.
can't wait to
You
build.
are.
But also what's bringing me joy from a leadership perspective right now is stretching the way that I'm prompting AI. So it's
Mm.
funny. I was prompting. I was with one of my besties in Miami last week, and she was watching me prompt, and she's like, "You talk to Claude like a person."
Claude is the
And I'm like,
homie, low key,
"Really?"
right?
Listen, Claudette in the chat. But I'm enjoying leveraging AI to even expand how I'm
That's
thinking
good.
and like what like how I'm spending my time and becoming more efficient and thinking differently. And
Yeah.
so I think the newness of like leveraging technology for good has really been really joyful for
I
me.
love it. Okay, and last one. Joy can sometimes feel fleeting, and so we create experiences or cultivate relationships or ongoing practices that help us to experience that in our day to day life. What is something, a practice, an activity, something you're doing these days that's bringing you joy, and how do you intentionally create space for that?
Laura, I am leaning into, and it's come with a little resistance, but I am leaning into being a grateful receiver.
Mm,
I am a recovering overgiver.
okay.
And it's taken a lot to be okay with receiving, but then also asking for help,
Yes.
right? And like allowing people to support and to pour back into and to give me what I need. And also, the people that know that you would never come and ask them for
Exactly.
anything transactionally. And so it's been like this season of like, no, people know you, right? And people know that you're genuine and they love you. And so it's allowing myself to be in a space of receiving, both personally, but like also like now on the romantic front, like, okay, like I'm gonna let this man be
Come
good
on,
to me
let
then.
this
Fine, great.
man,
So,
okay?
so I am leaning into and being open to being in my joyful receiver era.
I love that for you. Because it's vulnerable. It's a vulnerable
Yeah.
position, right? And it again causes us to challenge what stories we're telling ourselves around needing help or being on the receiving end instead of the giving end. So I love that you're giving
Absolutely.
yourself the space for that. That's beautiful.
Thank
Well, this
you.
has been lovely talking to you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, sharing the gift of your book. Where can people connect with you and anything you have going on that people should know about?
Absolutely. So I love connecting on
Okay.
LinkedIn. So please always find me there. My internet home base is my website. So www.suzette.com. You can learn more about the book, coaching offerings, etc. And I'll say something that's on the horizon for me that I am incredibly excited about. I was invited to be a part of a creator program to create a coaching app. And
Nice.
so my AI powered coaching app will come out on June 23rd. It's meant to be a daily coaching relationship. I told you when we joined, I had a moment of genius this morning and wiped it out. And then I had to go tell my partner through the program, like, I hope I didn't miss the deadline by wiping out what was already in there and approved with what's new. So he hasn't emailed me back and said I'm out the program, right? But I'm like, just I'm like, my bad. Well, y'all said April 23rd was the due date for this, but like, like being excited
I love
about,
that.
because I'm a tech girl, right? And so like being able to also meet people in the spaces that actually, want to continue to implore people, get certified in AI, learn the technology. It can only continue to enhance and augment your skill set, and it's going to be required for the
It's going
future
to
of
be
work. And
required.
so
Yeah.
please keep an eye out for June 23rd for the launch of the app. And I'm all on social. So Suzette, Instagram, Suezette Yasmin Robotham at TikTok. And I love engaging on social.
I love it. I love it. We'll put all those links in the show notes. So if you've been listening today and you found this conversation to be helpful, to be affirming, to be resonating with you, make sure you share this episode with your network. We are on all podcast streaming platforms. You can also listen from the Black Woman Leading YouTube channel and also from our website, blackwomanleading.com. If you'd like to connect with us on socials, we are at Black Woman Leading on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. If you love to connect with me personally, I am at Laura E. Knights. I'm very active on LinkedIn as well, so that's where I like to connect, but you can also find me over on Instagram. And finally, if you'd like to learn about the work that we're doing inside of organizations to create more effective leaders and teams, check out our corporate site at niceconsultinggroup.com. We love to connect with you in any of these ways. And until next time, be well. Black